Let's be real, there is nothing impossible to him who will try. The king of conquerors, the pillar of Macedonia, Iskander, aka Alexander the Great. We're out here getting busy. In a conversation that he had with Saber, he told her that he was casually chopping down trees with just the physical strength of his sword only because they were in his way. When everybody was going up against Jill's horde, Iskander was able to land a huge hit on one of the tentacles despite its ability to regenerate. Keep in mind that the sword that he pulled this off with is only one of his minor assets. In a confrontation that he had with a 100-face, Assassin tried to get near Iskander and he straight up punched her head straight off of her shoulders with his bare fist, literally sending her head flying into the air. We know that even with a light slam from his sword, he can still cause a great scale of damage to the ground below him. He had the physical strength to flick Waver across the room just by hitting him with his middle finger. At the Einsberg Castle, you had him lightly tap Waver with the back of his hand and Waver went flying across the field doing backflips. By just patting Waver on the back, it was enough to knock the wind out of his entire body. It also threw his body out of alignment when he did this. In a bout that he had with Assassin in the sewer, Iskander was still able to deflect Assassin's dirt at the last second. He then took that same knife and threw it back at Assassin, one-shotting him in the process. Iskander actually allowed him to do this just so he could give up his location. Please do not try those games over here. The manga takes this same scene a step further by having Iskander outright hit his dagger like a baseball and send it right back to him. Gotta give him the extra points for style. In a sword clash that he had with Artoria, the novel tells us that he had a slight edge over her in terms of physical strength. This was enough to send Artoria flying back despite the fact of her having gravity on her side and slamming down on him first. She also had gained momentum before the hit by combining her monoburst with her motorcycle. Still couldn't make him budge. In the confrontation that he had against Gil on the bridge, he was running through and also deflecting multiple shots from his Gate of Babylon and survived most of the way. When he was talking to Karya in Fate Grand Order Excel and Karya was fuming over his obsession with Tokiomi, Iskander straight up punched him out of nowhere, Waver himself being frightened that he actually might kill him. In Fate Extella, you had Nero clash with Iskander to measure how good his skills actually were. You even had an instance where he clashed one-on-one with Altera, who was a top servant herself. Iskander going as far to say that he wanted to go one-on-one at full power. Who needs to open things the normal way? Iskander was out here smashing entire wine barrels with one hit. We've seen him casually bare fist straight through a garage door at the beginning of the series and he didn't even seem bothered. As a matter of fact, he looked bored, as if it required no effort at all. Just him doing a small stomp alone is enough to create a shockwave in the area surrounding him. In the confrontation that he had with Saber when she was chasing after him, Iskander was not only clever enough to use his surroundings to slow her down, but the stone slab that he threw to knock her off course was said to weigh at least several tons in the novel, and he knocked it down with just his physical strength. To make this even more impressive, it's said that he did it with no effort. Despite Iskander not being able to actually fly, he can still survive high fall damage thanks to his chariot, as we seen him perform after his talk with Gilgamesh. It took a bare minimum of 80 phantasms for Gilgamesh to finally bring Iskander down, some of which he took straight to the front of his body. When Saber finally caught up with Iskander and released her phantasm in an instant, Iskander countered this by using the lightning speed of his trampling domination, which literally made him as fast as lightning with the help of his divine bulls, reinforced himself with the power of Zeus, and word for word decreased his reaction time to 0. He has an A+ in writing, giving him the ability to mount phantasmal and divine beasts, some of the highest creatures there is. He has his A rank in charisma. Most people would back down in the face of Gilgamesh, but even when Gilgamesh threatened to kill Iskander right in front of his face, he just laughed at his comments. Thanks to him being a servant, he has a greater ability to see in the dark than normal, being able to see the devastating mutilation that was done by Gilles when Waver was struggling to just move around. Waver even had to cast a flare to see on the same level. In the novel, it's stated by Waver that when he responded to Assassin, he moved at least lightning speed when he did it. Before he even arrived to the showdown in Fate Zero, Kirisugu mentioned that he could hear Iskandar's voice at a great distance. When he was with Waver, he was able to spot a magic smoke signal that was all the way across the city by the church without even reinforcing his eyesight. He was able to sense this directly off of impulse. Considering his access to the Library of Alexander, he's also very familiar with backgrounds, telling Gilgamesh he knew who he was without any actual leads. When Waver tried to hide the fact that he was reading a biography on Alexander, his attention to detail led him to notice that Waver put the book back on the shelf in the wrong direction. In the Grand Order Excel event, Iskander himself mentioned that he burned all of Zokin's bugs in his basement. We're talking about years worth of reserves gone in a matter of minutes. Thanks to his connection with Zeus, he can summon lightning at will, being able to destroy Servant Waver's phantasm in a matter of seconds. You have his phantasm Gordius Will, his own unique chariot that's being pulled by two divine bulls, and you have the physical phantasm that comes with it, which is his wheels of heaven's authority. This allows him to increase his physical damage during his trampling while it's being reinforced by the lightning of Zeus. The lower the opponent's strength, the stronger the move gets. Using this, he was able to ride over the familiars of Jill with no problem, the same familiars that Diarmu and Saber struggle with their efforts combined. The power of the chariot is so strong that he went straight through Irisville's bounded field, causing her damage and knocking her off balance. The novel tells us that Gordius' wheel itself is bigger than an actual truck, and that it has two blades on the side to increase the lethalness of his charges. He's been seen using this to cleave through an entire forest. Even when he was coming to a stop, these same blades have been seen crushing the asphalt around him. When he was up against Saber, he used these same blades to tear down an entire wall, causing the stone and the trees to fall down in front of her. From Fate's Strange Fate, we know that his chariot broke through all the protections of the Ainsburn castle, the phantasm being complimented from doing so. They had the speed to match the tentacles of Gio's horror, so when Saber got caught, it made up the difference, giving Iskander enough time to come in and save her. The chariot also has a barrier that reinforces Iskander's defenses. This is also something that helped him in his clash against Saber. He dodged multiple hits from the tentacles of Gio's horror all throughout the water, something that most servants wouldn't be able to survive. He was straight up outpacing Saber while she was chasing him down, despite the fact of her having a motorcycle, and it was being reinforced by her monoburst, to the point where she had to take a shortcut. The chariot is also said to transcend the laws of physics, going at more than 250 miles per hour. Thanks to the chariot's defense protections, he was able to save his master. The novel telling us that Waver would have suffocated from the blood and the toxins of Jill's familiars alone. The bulls themselves are outright said to walk on lightning when they travel through the air. The charge of his phantasm was enough to come in and trample straight over Lancelot with no effort, leaving him completely immobilized at the time and even fleeing the scene. The novel also tells us that he could have hit Saber and Diarmud as well. He just chose not to when he did so. The height that his chariot can reach is unquantified, being able to scale up to at least skyscrapers and even as high as the top of Gilles' horror. You had Waver mention that leaving Iskander unsupervised, his chariot could scorch the entire area of Shinto in just an hour. Waver also has brought up the fact that if he summons his phantasm inside a building, he believes that the building will instantly start to implode, adding an element of tactic that he can use for his summoning. Once they located Gilles' hideout, the chariot was able to destroy his entire workshop in one foul swoop. It's even described that it was burned down in a blink of an eye. Just like Iskander, summoning the chariot creates shockwaves and lightning in the area around him. Just being in its vicinity would keep you on guard. We know that he can also use the lightning of Zeus to empower himself as well as his weapons. He can summon lightning anywhere that he pleases, being able to create an entire rift in the sky to bring his chariot out. Before Iskander even landed in his chariot, lightning was already striking the ground by Diarmid and Saber. From Extella, we know that he can apply a continuous lightning effect to his sword and cast out waves of lightning, projectiles, and even a reinforced crater of lightning around him. He has an assault that makes an entire arc of lightning that travels for a great distance in front of him. And then you have his reality marble, Eonian, Army of the King. Not only is Iskander one of the few people with the reality marble, but he's one of the people that had it before it became a trend. Summoning this at the Einsburn Castle, he brings his targets back to his homeland, except now he's being reinforced by his entire army. Once he summoned his reality marble, Hassan of the 100 Face was getting slaughtered by all of his men right in front of him. In fact, they just flat out started running away. They couldn't even compare. Using his marble, he had the power to relocate Geo's monster, dropping it right in front of Kirisugu, an effect that can extend for at least 100 meters. The story tells us that he actually nerfed himself, so when he summoned his marble against Gilgamesh, he only had a few minutes compared to what he'd have normally. Among his soldiers, he has an even higher resistance than he would normally, saying that their spirit alone is enough to split oceans. We know that when he brought out his marvel, he actually only tapped into his own reserves because he knew that going into waivers would be so costly that it would actually take his life. You have the famed horse of Alexander, Bucephalus, which you can see him riding throughout the story. The horse itself having such a heavy background that it also is categorized as a heroic spirit. Very similar to Emia's projections, even outside the reality marble, this still can be summoned at will. From the story, we know that as the reality marble was breaking from Gil's Aya, Bucephalus had enough speed and strength to cover the gap that was eliminating most of his men. Iskander can also use this to reinforce his charging power and even let out some of his lightning nearby while he's in pursuit. When it comes to Iskander's army itself, it says that he has more than 10,000 men at the ready. And since the rank of this phantasm comes in at EX, more than being just familiars, they manifest as independent servants under him, some of them being able to manifest even outside the marble. We've seen this when he summoned Mithranes when they were preparing to take down Geo's monster. They also come with an E-rank independent action. From Extella, we know that he can summon multiple servants as phantoms and use them as projectiles at once. He can casually summon their weapons to do a long range strike. He can also use phantoms to defend against some attacks. In his younger servant variant, which is Alexander, he beat Rama, who is one of the strongest spirits out there, in an arm wrestling match 2 times. He hadn't even reached Iskander yet. In the Solomon chapter, he's used his connection to lightning to not only strike all of the area around them, but reinforce his own attack to stab Lev Laner straight through the chest. This also left behind residual electrocution. This doesn't even include the fact that Lev tried to block him with a demon god pillar that was reinforced by his magecraft, and Alexander just powered through it. In this form, you have his phantasm, Zeus, the blessing of the god, which yet again not only reinforces his strength, but increases his divinity as well. We've seen him use this to electrocute a mass of demon god pillars at once and clear all of them with no effort. Just like his divine bulls, he can use his lightning to ride through the air, giving him the ability to fly when he's on the horse. You had one of the pillars try to outright hit him with a laser, and the lightning worked as a shield to completely neutralize it. And then you have Bucephalus once again. We've seen Alexander use this to break one of them apart entirely, the demon god pillars being worse than some servants. Let it be known, he didn't run over territories in his past for nothing. He's got the power of the strongest Greek god, a chief Greek god on his side, an unparalleled level of leadership, and an unbreakable spirit on the level of having battle continuation. Plus, he's one of the only servants summoned in Extella as a top heroic spirit. No doubt we gotta give him at least the B rank. Even some of the best servants should be concerned that they don't let their guard down.